state of agriculture. The big difference there. Okay. Commerce, again, thanks for everybody for coming. Before we start our program today, we have many sponsors that I would like to thank to help that put today's event on. First off, our series sponsors, Bremer Bank and Titan Machinery. Let's give our series sponsors a round of applause. Also, we have several event sponsors. First Independent Bank, Northwestern Farm Management, AURI, Relco, True Shrimp, Vanderhagen Skogren Associates, Ace Hardware, Lyon County Environmental, Buffalo Ridge Concrete, Legal Estate Planning Solutions, Lockwood Motors, Egg Country Farm Credit Services, Lanners Brothers Construction, New York Life, and MVTV. Thank you all for joining. Before we get over to our panelists, I'm going to turn it over to Paul Lanou. He's with Lyon. He is with Minnesota West. He's like the jack of all trades when it comes to agriculture. And he is going to be awarding the Lyon County Farm Family of the Year.
Thank you all for coming. Greatly appreciate having you here at our State of Ag event. Typically, the county extension committees have the opportunity to award a Farm Family of the Year, and we've done this historically for many, many years. And the selection criteria is to find a family that is involved in the community, has impacted agriculture, has innovative farming techniques, and is willing to move on to that next generation and to come up with innovative methods. Historically speaking, the Farm Families of the Year have the opportunity to go to Farm Fest, where they're presented with their plaques and their awards. And this year, unfortunately with Farm Fest being canceled, they were not able to get that in person, but they were able to receive the recognition. And typically at our county, we would recognize those individuals at the county fair. And again, with that not being able to happen, we figured this would be a perfect avenue and an opportunity for us as a community to come together and to celebrate our Farm Family of the Year. And so I'll have our farm family come up onto the stage, and I'll read you a little bit. Our Farm Family of the Year this year is Robert and Paula G. family. So the G family farm is a century farm that was established in 1902 by Robert's great-grandfather. Robert's grandfather and father worked on the farm as well. The family grows corn, soybeans, alfalfa, and wheat. The G's operate a farrow-to-finish hog operation and run a herd of 110 registered Angus cows that calve in the spring. Growing up on the farm, Robert worked alongside of his father, Harold, and continued working to do so until Harold's passing. Robert currently works with his son, Jason. Jason and his wife, Tara, are the fifth generation of the G family to work on the land. Robert's wife, Paula, manages the farm's bookkeeping. She gets and delivers machinery and equipment and food and parts to the farm. Robert and Paula raised 4 children, Betty, Corrine, Roxanne, and Jason. All of the children have helped on the farm growing up in different capacities. Now all 4 are married and are still involved in some type of agriculture. They also help on the farm as needed, along with their 6 grandchildren. Robert is a supervisor on the Stanley Township Board. He's a member of the St. Clotilde Church Cemetery Board and past parish trustee. He's a member of the Lyon County Farm Bureau, Lyon County Cattlemen's Association, and Minnesota Angus Association. And Robert and Paula are going to be celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary this September. Jason, their son who farms with them, is unable to be with us. He's on his honeymoon and couldn't convince him to forego that to be here with us today. But I want to extend a sincere congratulations to the G family. I was really hoping that when they were awarded this honor that we'd be able to present it at the county fair because that's how I got to know the family. A long time ago, I showed livestock with their kids, and just a very fitting family for the Farm Family of the Year, having a true passion for agriculture and a genuine interest in our youth of today. And so, with great pride and honor, I'm glad to present Bob and Paula G. with the Farm Family of the Year plaque. And with that, we'll move on to the next portion of our program, and I'll turn the stage back over to Brad.
Our panelists could come up, and then we'll get you all mic'd up, or the Studio One crew will get you mic'd up. That would be great. All right. Again, thanks for coming. This is our third year doing the State of Agriculture event. The last 2 years, we've been over at the Marshall-Lyon County Library. We had 65 people our first year. We had 65 people our second year. This year, we blossomed to 90, which was really good. This is an interesting year, as every year is for agriculture. Finally, we get a nice year of weather. I mean, if there's been anything good about the last 5 years, the 5 months, it has been the pristine weather that we have had for agriculture. Unfortunately, as we all know, the prices aren't that great. But it's another topic, because I'm sure we'll get brought up a few times today. So let's meet our panelists. To my right, we have Greg Borbroom. Greg has been a panelist each of the 3 years that we have held this event. So Greg, along with his family, are owners of Borbroom Ag Resources, which is the name of the family farming operation, which raises hogs, corn, soybeans, and does feed milling. Greg serves as the president of the Minnesota Pork Producers Association, which oversees state and national legislative and public policy interests traveling to both St. Paul and Washington, D.C. on behalf of Minnesota pork producers. Greg is also a member of the Lyon County Farm Bureau Board of Directors. The person second to my right is Representative Chris Swidzinski. Chris is a farmer, small business owner, and local state representative for District 16A. He sits on the Energy and Climate Finance and Policy Division, Commerce and Taxes Committees. Third, you heard from Paul earlier, he is the Dean of Agriculture and Business Management at Minnesota West Technical College, Farm Business Management Instructor, SMSU Egg Bowl Scholarship Coordinator, and local beef and crop farmer. Our fourth panelist is Ken Franski. This is his first time on the panel. Ken is on the agronomy services, is an agronomy services manager at Central. He has 26 years in the agriculture industry, including the last 5 at Central. His prior experience includes agronomics sales. That's a tricky word, Ken.
Sorry.
Sales, support, and training in egg retailer and the seed industry. And our final panelist is Eric Mcveigh. He's the plant superintendent at the Marshall Archer Daniels Midland, or the ADM plant. Eric has been in the corn processing and ethanol industry across 4 states for over 20 years. And so as you can hear, I mean, we have 5 different experts in 5 different areas of agriculture, although I'm certain each question that I ask today, feel free to answer a question that might not be in your field, but you might know the answer to, that's for sure. I mean, you're certainly all well-rounded to answer any of these questions. So I asked ahead of time for some questions for today's panel. But before I do want to start, I do need to recognize one other person in the audience, and that's Senator Gary Dames. Senator Gary Dames is right here. Thanks for coming, Senator Dames. I saw her on her phone earlier, but Kaylee, where are you at? Because it's her birthday today, and I would be, oh gosh, she's way down there, walking away because she just heard her birthday. But she's 26 today. All right. All right, again, thanks panelists for being here today. So question, and the first one it's an open question. I know you all deal with it. And I know it probably gives you a lot of heartburn. How is regulation affecting agriculture and development of agribusiness in the state of Minnesota? Who wants to start? I could go to all of you. Let's just go right in order. Greg?
That's a good way to do it.
I think regulation is impacting agriculture across the board, obviously. But locally, when it comes, say, to permitting hog barns and stuff, I talk about this pretty frequently, and it's a compliment to our county. Our county has pretty rigid but very well-defined, say, zoning regulations. So if you're going to build a facility or something, you pretty well know if you're able to or not, because we do have pretty well-defined regulations compared to some of the surrounding counties where it's just, you have to just kind of go make your case and see what, kind of on the whim of the board at the time. So that's a compliment to our county. On a Minnesota level, our regulations, especially relating to MPCA and stuff, are pretty restrictive compared to some of the surrounding states. And, but there again, it's a little bit regional. The karst region of southeast Minnesota and the Sandia regions of the central part of the state, they're really struggling when it comes to building and permitting. Our part of the state, there again, if you're kind of doing things right, I would say they're pretty reasonable. And then the federal regulations, you know, you sort of you learn to deal with what you have, and so I probably think they're restrictive, but we just know what they are and we just deal with it.
No, Brad, I think, you know, that's, you know, Greg said it pretty well, just from a standpoint of, you know, from a restriction standpoint, from a policy standpoint. You know, for every issue that's out there, there is a bad case scenario that caused that regulation to potentially even come forward. And so, well, I think Minnesota agriculture, we're top of the line when it comes to production and cleanliness and keeping our land right. You know, one of the big things I hear is just the lengthened process. You know, there's a large project that we potentially lost in southwest Minnesota a number of years ago, and neighboring state of South Dakota got it done in 30 days. And MPCA, we're talking years before something like that was going to be potentially moving forward. And I think that's from an agility standpoint where we have to improve. We just simply, we understand what works, we understand what doesn't work. What you need to take is some of the politics out of these issues, whether it be mining in northern Minnesota, whether it be putting a hog barn in southwest Minnesota. You know, we need to encourage value-added agriculture, period, where we're actually growing the goods. You know, we can ship corn to China, we can ship beans to China, we can ship our grain across the globe as an unrefined product, but when we can add value here, whether it's turning it into an edible protein in hogs or beef, we have to do that. I mean, that's ultimately how you're going to see value and jobs and economic activity grow right here in southwest Minnesota. And so from a regulatory standpoint, we need to make sure that we're competitive. Like, everyone would agree that we don't want to have cities, you know, flushing their toilets right in the river, but there is a fine line there where you're going to have little cities dry up. So whether you're building a hog barn or you're a small city, you know, the ideas are the same and the complaints are the same. They're saying these regulations are impossible for us to reach. So how do we mix that balance of reality, economics, and opportunity? So,
Okay. Paul, anything to add?
Always. Anytime you give me a chance to talk, I'll do that. So when looking at the reason why we have regulations is because of consumer demand for some reason. You know, some consumer decided that, or some politician, sorry, Chris, decided to do that. But so when we look at why we have regulations and policies and procedures, I do see that there's an opportunity within agriculture with ideas on more sustainable emission standards and things along those lines. Agriculture constitutes about 9% of the total greenhouse gas emissions, and there's goals by 2050, you know, to be at net zero. And agriculture, instead of being the target, can be an opportunity to really look at some of those avenues as a revenue stream for some of our farmers. And so regulation makes it difficult in the day-to-day. One of the things that I'd encourage to think about, though, is what are the policy that drives the regulation, and what are the drivers for the policy that creates those ideas, and what's the motivation? So as we go forward in the next couple of years, something to think about, how is the public mentality shifting, and how is that going to impact us in agriculture? We can either see it as a barrier, and we will work with it in agriculture. The beautiful thing about us in ag is that we know the land, we know the soil, we know our crops, we know our animals, and we know what's good for them and to do well. And so we'll want to work to benefit agriculture in so many different ways, but at the end of the day, we drive for our consumers, and that's why we farm. And so we need to make sure that we meet the consumer demands.
Ken?
A couple words that come to mind with regulations is, you know, there's probably at least 4 simple tiers we look at: townships, county, state, federal. And we have to be adaptive because they're ever changing. I think an example outside of animal agriculture that Greg kind of touched on is within row crop agriculture. We have a Minnesota groundwater rule that goes into effect here September 1. Now, is that going to impact all of us corn, soybean farmers, small grain farmers in Lyon County or southwest Minnesota? No. But it is going to institute some different best management practices that will help producers increase their profitability. But it doesn't feel good to be regulated. You know, I want to control my own destiny as a producer and as a consultant agronomically with the producers we deal with. But for some producers, I think it's going to kind of fall off the radar a little bit with everything else going on. But like Paul mentioned, it creates opportunities. We can look at it as a threat, or we can look at it as how do we make our systems better within our own operations.
Eric, anything to add?
Probably for us as a large business, we can comply with the rules and regulations. It's stuff we do. That's not that hard. There is a cost to doing all those. We just need to make sure that that cost is worth it and what we want, really. The biggest thing for us is we have to, anymore, to be competitive, be very, very fast and flexible. And the faster and more clear we can make that process, the better off we're going to help everybody. So.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, next question is directed at Greg. Many packing plants closed for a period of time as a result of COVID-19 in the spring, causing a major market disruption. What is the status of the swine processing industry today, and how did these market disruptions impact hog producers?
Yeah, that's kind of the first question that's ever asked. When I bump into anybody, even last evening talking to someone, this first question I ask, how are the markets today? How are things going? So in reverse, right now I'd say the markets are back to normal. Capacity is close to normal. So we're able to market our hogs, I say us, our farm, and our whole industry, pretty much normally into the normal market channels. What led up to that, you know, kind of the perfect storm, Morel plant, the Smithfield plant in Sioux Falls, the JBS plant in Worthington, and the Tyson plant in Waterloo essentially all closed at the same time. Each are around 18 to 20,000 head per day plants, which each of them individually are about 4 to 5% of the U.S. hog kill. So in, you know, within a short period of time, about 15% of the U.S. hog kill was ended. And it took them 3-4 weeks to get reopened or so, maybe 6, I think, for Sioux Falls, if I recall. At that point in time, we pretty much lost our market across the board. Farmers couldn't sell their pigs. That was pretty devastating. Pigs were continuing to grow in the barn. New pigs were continuing to be born, you know, pushing the ones that had to get sold. So then farmers couldn't sell their market hogs, and that's when we had a huge discrepancy in pricing. You had grocery store shelves sitting empty. The carcass cutout price was phenomenally high because the grocery stores needed to get meat, but yet there was, you know, we lost that broken link, was that the packing industry in the middle was the broken link. So we were having pigs backed up on the farm. A lot of farmers had to euthanize pigs or sell them in what we all called non-traditional markets. We sold a lot of pigs from our own farm. We sold pigs that ended up going to Pennsylvania, Alabama, North Dakota, Kansas, Wisconsin, for very, very low price, but at least we were able to avoid euthanizing pigs. Within the industry, our pork producer organization did a survey. About 280,000 pigs were euthanized, market weight pigs in Minnesota, about 70,000 in Iowa, lots of baby pigs in North Carolina, and then they probably about 240 or about 200 or 190,000 were sold into non-traditional markets. That was the result. Back today, packers are running close to 100%.
Okay. Anybody else that want to add on to that?
Well, I think I believe 2 or 3 packing plants were affected by the big windstorm too. When that happened in Iowa, weren't they shut down for a day or two when that occurred? So you know those are the market forces that we live in when we don't have packing plants here in Southwest Minnesota where those animals go and where they have that expertise. Even just weather events have had a potential impact on that. So.
Yeah, just a last thought on that, not to belabor it, but the heart of the inability to market hogs was right in our part of the state. Southwest Minnesota, northwest Iowa, and into Nebraska, eastern South Dakota, because the 3 plants I named, you know, they're our market. So we were impacted much more heavily than, say, producers in the eastern Corn Belt. But this has drifted. It happened in Canada too. The Oli meal plant in Quebec had to close down for a period of time, and Canadian producers were in the same situation as we were a month or 2 ago.
Sure. Okay.
if you don't mind, the cattle industry is a little different in that capacity in that we didn't have to euthanize as many of the animals. It's just that the processing plants, with them going offline, it just backed up production. I know on our farm, we ended up having our animals there for an extra 3 weeks. In that time, and we were fortunate that we were able to get them moved in a timely manner, but the animals put on additional weight, which then created more product that wasn't able to get out the doors as fast as it probably could have. I mean, pre-COVID, about 50% of the food is consumed outside the home. You take that market away, people still have to eat, but they eat differently. And that's where the whole thing was a supply chain issue, you know, where we just got bottlenecked because we were assuming that kids would be able to drink milk, you know, from school, from those milk cartons and those types of things. And so we're still feeling the repercussions in the cattle world, just as they're slowly catching up, but it takes time. It takes time to process through those 800,000 animals that were delayed, you know, in July.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Thanks, Chris. Paul and Greg. All right, next question, directed at Ken. Ken, every year the crop season has its own unique challenges, and 2020 is no exception. How are the growers keeping themselves profitable during these leaner economic times in agriculture?
Great question, Brad. You know, and you're exactly right. Every year you feel like a rookie in this business, whether you've been at it 1 year or, you know, like the G's been at it, married 50 years and farming close to 50 years and things like that. Congratulations to your family. But it's being adaptive. And a couple things that we see growers doing is they're probably scrutinizing things maybe harder than ever. And not just here in the last 6 months or 12 months, but in the last 3 to 5 years, or maybe it's even been since $5 and $7 corn, because I think producers are intelligent. They know that's not going to ride out forever. You know, so things that they do, then what we see being success with is diversification. That's scrutinizing inputs. That's looking to maximize where they put the inputs across every acre in every field. I mean, the advantages of precision ag help us do that efficiently and repeatably, and also measure the outcomes that growers have to say, yes, I made a good decision, or I think I can make a little bit better decision yet. We certainly see diversification increasing with livestock expansion, you know, whether that's completely new operations, maybe they're finishing hogs for another group, maybe they're doing organic production, maybe they're looking at contracts like silage production. We see dairy expand in certain areas of Minnesota and just across the border in South Dakota, and we certainly have got canning crops in Minnesota from a contract basis. So a lot of diversification. The other thing that I think has picked up momentum is I think growers are realizing not every acre should be farmed because it's not profitable. And some acres are non-profitable every single year. And when you can capture that data, measure that data, analyze that data, growers are looking at, I'm going to let somebody else farm that, or I'm going to look at alternative programs possibly. Some of our county programs, our state programs, you know, through NRCS, soil and water conservation districts, that there's some good funding to take non-profitable land out of production, still maybe get some payment to farm it or rent it, that it cash flows to maybe closer to break even instead of $100 or $200 or $300 below break even cost. So there's a lot of creativity going on right now. And it's not easy to show profit on paper right now. You know, you can lie to your banker all day long, Alan, can't you, and show a profit. But eventually the rubber's got to meet the road and get in the field and prove it to everybody as well, too. So it's a difficult time with sub $3 corn, $8.40 beans and things like that. You know, some things have looked better, but I think it's going to be a tough couple years ahead for growers to be creative in their thinking.
Well, along those same lines that Ken is talking about from a cost of production, you say that they got to be careful on that. I mean, we get the data from southern Minnesota, and they're showing that the average cost of production just for the direct costs, like corn, or, you know, the seed, fertilizer, chemical, all those other things, the direct cost for a bushel of corn in 2019 was $3.45. So if the ethanol plant wants to help us out, that'd be awesome. Just saying, all right. So I mean, with today's corn prices, the farmer is losing 40 cents a bushel for what it costs to produce those. And so they have to scrutinize, and they're starting to tighten their belts quite a bit on that and analyze all their expenses. Beans are right at the direct costs right now, where they're covering direct costs. That's not paying anything else, taxes, insurance, anything. It's paying for your direct costs. So that's where it's becoming a challenge because the numbers were short.
Okay, anyone else? Great, thank you. Next question, it's directed at Paul, but I would imagine any of you will be able to kind of chime in on this. So how is the uncertainty in the world impacting farm financial health now and into the future? And I know it's been touched on a little bit already. Paul?
There's a lot going on
right
right now. And so from a farming, So actually, I had a chance to, I work with a bunch of farm business management instructors across southern Minnesota here, and I just asked them, what's your trends? What are you seeing? What are they thinking? And the overall arching message that I received from them, there's some good things that are going on. I mean, the uncertainty with the crop yields, as indicated, are looking good. The crops are looking, they're starting to get a little dry, but for the most part, we're looking pretty good. It's just, how do we deal with the uncertainty of the tariffs? And such a large percentage of our net farm income this year is going to be from subsidized programs, from government income. That it helps this year. And when I asked the instructors what are they thinking, they said the farmers are feeling okay. One guy spoke eloquently. He said, well, a quarter of them they're doing terrible. A quarter of them are doing all right, and half of them are held together with baling wire and duct tape. But they're not going to show anybody that. It's getting a little bit tight. And so this last year has helped, save a lot of these farms with the CFAP and some of those other programs. That's held things together. The issue that I see as a major concern is with the uncertainty, as we have some people losing their jobs, their off-farm income, that's what's helping some of our farms to survive. I mean, the net farm income last year was like $25,000. I can get you a number if you'd like, but it was like $25,000 that the farm made for net farm income. I got 6 kids. That's not going to cut it, and so that's where we have to have some off-farm income to do that. Fortunately, I'm blessed to be able to have a job to do that, but some of the families don't. And that's where we're starting to see some of those struggles from a delinquency standpoint. As farms aren't able to pay those bills because they rely on that off-farm income, when that off-farm income goes away, we've got some challenges. So looking for trends for this upcoming year, I think cash flow season is going to be unique. We held it together this year. But looking forward to 2021, I'm guessing my banker's not going to allow multiple CFAPs or all these other things coming in there. And so how do I make a cash flow that works? And so another area of uncertainty is just the farmer's mental health and well-being. I mean, I'm not going to lie. When COVID hit, we were in the middle of calving, and I loved it. My kids worked a lot. And we scooped a whole lot of pens during that time, and we were able to make it work. But you can't keep on with that. No. And so farmers, they need their kids to get back to work. For us to do harvest in the combine, along with, kids' schoolwork, there's some of those uncertainty things that stress on the farmers, and that uncertainty is really weighing on them. Right now, okay, we're excited for school to start, but what's going to happen when harvest hits? So keep an eye on your farmer friends, especially during harvest, and if they have families or those types of things too. If they're doing any distance stuff, it is going to be a challenge for them. So there is a lot of uncertainty and a lot of financial stress, but then also the family stress that can't be forgotten.
Thanks, Paul. Anybody else?
Paul did a good
It's a
job.
big question.
Yeah.
Okay. I think, Paul, you must have summed it up really well. Okay. Next question. And this is for all, and Julie can help me with this one because she just approached me with this one today. How can we cut out the middleman when it comes to farm to table? Does that question make sense? Okay.
Well, I think, it was talked a little bit about, what are people doing to maintain profitability, and you need to grow what the market wants, right? So if it's farm to table, that means it's not traditional agriculture. You're not putting field corn on the plate. You're putting it through something and turning it into something else. But from a vegetable standpoint, there are programs. I know Farm Bureau has done a lot of work with kind of a farm to fork program with schools, trying to bring integration from buying and locally sourcing as much product as possible. We're a bread basket, and what bread baskets do is don't eat all they produce. And so finding those things and how we do it. You look what's going on in California. There is probably a better example of agriculture under attack, in drought, and overregulation, and what that's doing, because they actually grow vegetables. They grow strawberries and carrots and the rest. And what is going to happen to that when they can't grow that there anymore? Because water rights and the rest, if you read any article about that, they're having huge issues. And I've been thinking, how do we integrate some of those agricultural practices and bring them into the Midwest when they're not going to do it anymore? They don't want to do it anymore. They want to cycle that water out of the agricultural sector in California, which has kept the Central Valley alive for a half a century or 70, 80 years. And where else is that going to go? Is it going to go to Mexico? Their recession is deepening worse than I think the global potential recession that's moving around. And, but, how do we innovate? How do we ask? How do we, find that right sizing? And so integrating development, we can't just all grow wheat. We can't just all grow corn. On our farm, we've started to do an edible bean as well. But what other areas can we do that so that it is a closer integration to really honestly fill grocery stores, to really honestly not just kind of a niche, but actually say, how do producers, is it moving 5 or 6 or 10, then it becomes a labor issue. I just read an article about coffee beans in Costa Rica, where a coffee plantation in Costa Rica on average is like 1.5 acres. So you have a farmer that farms 1.5 acres, and that's his plantation. And his issue is that he can't get labor to come in from other parts of the other country, whether they come in from Nicaragua or whether they come in from Chile or whatever. These workers kind of come around, and because of COVID, they can't move people in and out of international borders because of it. They're not allowing it. And so, what do we do here in Southwest Minnesota to diversify our economy, diversify what we grow, to better suit what we eat, but also what others are going to be eating? And whether that's organic, whether that's different types of meat products.
So I'd contribute to that, Brad. From my point of view, we don't want to eliminate the middleman. The middleman provides a service. We're in the breadbasket of the nation, and the Midwest is the breadbasket of the world, essentially. We don't need irrigation here. We have the soil, the rain, the temperature to be the breadbasket of the world. If you go out to the coast, you go out to New York or up and down the East Coast, up and down the West Coast, and you look at all of those people and you wonder where can all that food possibly come from to feed those people? And you drive past our fields and our farms and you see all the crops and livestock, and it's like, who's going to eat all that? Well, the fact is you need a lot of middlemen, you need the transportation, you need the processing to get the food from the breadbasket to where the people are. And then there's also seasonal, all the vegetables and seasonal stuff that comes up from South America, Central America, or the southern U.S. It takes, the middleman is necessary. Farm to table is a wonderful concept, and on a local level, it works for somebody that wants a very small little niche market and a niche deal for their own pride and their own business. But the fact of the matter is, in feeding a world population, every cog is important. We learned that in the livestock industry when the packing plants shut down. When you're selling, and we sold several thousands of pigs to people for backyard butchering and that type of thing. Yeah, that was farm to table, but it takes a lot of people to offset the demand for food on the coast or where the population centers are.
Brad, I'd like to challenge the paradigm. How is it new? I mean, 200 years in the United States, 2,000 years globally, how did it ever get from the farm to the table? It's always went that way. Whether that's subsistence living, that still occurs in our global planet today, or Greg's hogs going out to the East Coast, the West Coast, through 3 to 4 middlemen. It still gets from the farm to the plate. Now, maybe the difference is the plate coming to the farm? Is that the trend we actually see where, we know that statistics tell us people want to have more connection to where it was born and raised? It doesn't mean it has to come direct from the farm directly onto their plate for supper that night. I mean, that happens still in countries today, but again, we're back to talking about creating opportunities. I mean, the farmers markets here in Lyon County or Yellow Medicine County or Lincoln County, are they busting at the seams to go from the farm to the plate? No, because Hy-Vee's still in business. I stop and get something at Casey's when I fill gas and things like that. I'm not making that daily pit stop to the farmer's market to take food home for my family. But I still have my sweet corn patch. So I think there's, good, but I think there's some challenges there of how we think about connecting these things up too. I don't have all the answers, but it creates a ton of creative opportunities. I mean, we've got large companies across the U.S. buying acres, controlling acres, because they can't fill shelves with organic produce or organic certified, free range, whatever all the popular terms are. That shelf space goes empty the quickest. So they're getting more integrated into that market as well too, whether that's contracts, purchasing land, contract production, things like that.
My thoughts on this one, it works for some. And with the COVID situation, it's made more awareness for people that they want to know where their food comes from. It works for some. But from an efficiency standpoint, Greg is really good at raising hogs. He can raise it very efficiently. Why would we have Greg working on some of those other avenues and those other things that just, you have somebody that their business is to promote it. I mean, with me on our cattle farm, with what we do, I don't have the opportunity to go out and to market and to sell and to deliver and all those other things. And we need to feed a broader population. My family fits a certain need. Other families fit other needs, you know, within their farm business. So it works for some. And we, you said it's gone over the last 200 years. We've become a very efficient system. I mean, 6% of our disposable income goes to food. That's unheard of globally. We're very good at what we do. Very good at what we do. And so I agree with you guys on the panelists on that.
All right, Eric, it's time to, got one directed at you. You've been pretty quiet over there, so let's hear from Eric a little bit. And this is actually, I would imagine anybody can actually answer this one too. COVID-19 has disrupted the world and local economies. What impacts has COVID had on business that you work closely with, and how have you all responded? I know we've kind of touched on this already, but Eric?
It's impacted us kind of with everybody that's here, from a supply and a deliver side from my end. You know, we can talk about the hog or the cattle side, all the sales from us went way down because there were less. So we had to adjust to that significantly. On the other side, some of our products went up. So we had to change our product mix. We had to increase some things. We had to decrease some things. It was quite a challenge. We ran out of parts. It was hard to get some of our parts because other businesses shut down. Or some we could buy the parts, we couldn't get them. We couldn't get them to us because the trucking was shut down or the rail was shut down. We had to be very creative. So we had to adjust a lot. And a lot of the products and the hog and the cattle, what we see right now is it's about where it was. But for a while, it was quite a challenge as we're filling up with products that we want to move, but there's nowhere to move it to. So it was significantly disruptive, both locally and across our whole distribution and production chain. And there were changes all across the world that we all adjusted to, and we came out, we made it. It was interesting. How about that?
Okay. I would imagine, Greg, I know you kind of touched on this already. Anybody else kind of want to touch on this?
Well, I just kind of, obviously this is an agricultural forum, but you know, I was just, article I just read this last week talked about Walmart's profitability up as 80%. And you know, as a direct correlation to COVID, you know, that was one of the main concerns that when I was visiting with Main Street businesses, in how that dichotomy where you literally could be selling almost the exact same thing, and yet a Main Street business was closed, but Walmart was wide open, right? Your churches were closed, but Walmart was wide open. Your schools were closed, but Walmart was wide open. And I'm not disparaging large retailers, but I think that there's a large disparity in how different businesses were treated during this pandemic. And you know, I think profitability, the ability to survive the wave, is dramatically different. I mean, there's talk from a restaurant perspective. There's talk, which we sell to as agriculture, a lot of restaurants are going to fail. And if you actually did a real calculation on failure of restaurants with 40% of the food we eat was outside the home, where was that eaten? In restaurants. And so how long does it take to open up a restaurant? What is the average length of a restaurant's life expectancy? A couple of years, and maybe longer. And you've got not only the long-term ones closing, but you've got the new young couple who literally spent their entire life savings to start a business, and it's gone. And do you think it's tough to get a loan in agriculture right now? Think about opening a restaurant or reopening or getting the capital to refill your freezer. Those are the real possibilities of families that, I mean, it's going to be a lost generation of businesses essentially. And unless we turn that around and really open up our economy and understand, obviously we want to keep people safe because of COVID, but from an agricultural perspective, we have a vested interest that restaurants really can thrive. We have a vested interest that our schools are open. We have a vested interest that our rural economies thrive and our suburban folks understand what real agriculture is, not what they read in a storybook. And that's part of a story that we need to sell as rural legislators, as folks that work in education and folks that work in crop management and industrial production of agriculture. We need to tell our story of what we do in rural Minnesota and how we are not Ramsey County, we are not Hennepin County, we're Lyon County, we're Lincoln County, we're Yellow Medicine County. We're small counties that understand who our neighbors are. We know where our food comes from, and that's our job, and that's how we're going to get through.
Okay, good. All right, Chris, you're next.
Okay.
This is directed at you, and you hear from a lot of people, probably statewide, not just in southwestern Minnesota. So what common questions or comments do you hear from farmers and banks across the state?
Boy, just general regulation. Sometimes from some of the banks oftentimes deal with federal regulation, state regulation at the same time. Dodd-Frank has really put the pinch on smaller operations versus large. You look at what's Main Street businesses and what they have to do for in-store, in-house regulation versus outside. Whether you're a big bank or a small bank, whether you're ADM or whether you're a small miller, sometimes those regulations are the same and sometimes they're vastly different. It's your ability to absorb the cost and pass it on. If you're a small entity, whether you're a small business, it's really difficult when you have a very limited amount of market share and the ability to pass that cost on, whether it be government regulation or taxes or whatnot. It's a lot easier to be a bigger entity because you spread that cost out. Because if you raise taxes on business, what business does? Does not pay the taxes. It's cost, and they pass it on to their consumer. And so I think once politicians understand that, that's our job to teach them. But I'd say one of the issues literally I've probably heard every single week since I've ever been in the legislature is, I get memes, I get emails, I get texts, I get phone calls. I say, Chris, how do we just move the state line over a couple hundred miles? But obviously that's more of a tongue-in-cheek, but honestly, that's what I hear the most. But then when it just comes from banking and farming, just the regulatory predatoriness of the MPCA and their real concern with that. There's just talk again about raising the fees and costs for permitting through MPCA, whether you're a larger animal egg group or whatever. And the trouble with that is whenever you empower an agency not to be under the authority of the legislature, you're going to have problems. And whether that's the DNR, whether it's the MPCA, one of the biggest issues is if a vast majority of their funding source is self-generated. So when they send someone out to look at something, a sewer plant or whatnot, they take a fee of $5,000 and take that in. That's $5,000 that they don't have to ask the legislature for. That's not good, right? I mean, I believe that from an executive branch standpoint, that if there's a rule change, that they need to come to the legislature. If it's cost an individual or business or city over $10,000 because of a bureaucratic rule change, you need to come to the legislature for approval. Because there is way too much power stuck in the executive branch to make rules, to affect businesses in a negative way. So, there you go.
Okay. Anybody else want to touch on that? All right, Eric, next one's for you again. And again, there's going to be a lot of crossover answers in a lot of these questions. I mean, a lot of these questions you probably touched on already, so apologize for that. Consumer demand for products is changing. Consumer expectations for companies is changing. How are all your companies adapting to changing consumer demands and consumer expectations? Eric?
So we experienced lots of changes in demand. From COVID, we talked about restaurants. Our sugar production on certain kinds went down because of pop. So one type of sugar we make is used in the big dispenser things. So nobody's going to the store, or nobody's going to the restaurant, so the demand for that one went down. The demand for the kind that goes in cans, that went up, so it was about the same. But we also look at, people want green stuff. They want sustainable stuff. They want new, better for you things. So we have whole groups in research working on making our products greener, making them sustainable, new products, probiotics. We have a new plastic we make that helps the water bottles. All these things from plant products. They're all green-based, they're sourced. We work on our sustainability and have significant energy, greenhouse gas reduction goals, efficiency goals, water reduction goals. These are all important for consumers, and in general, they usually make sense and they save us money. They're hard to get there, but if we can use less energy to do something, overall that's a better decision. So we work really hard on that, and we've made a lot of good progress on those. A lot of energy reduction, water reduction, all those things, in trying to take all the products you guys are growing and making and turn them into a higher value product. So that's how we try to approach it.
Okay. Anybody else?
I'll take this in a little bit different stance. So from the educational view, so working at a community and technical college and working closely with our friends at SMSU, we always have to be looking at what are the emerging trends. And so within our agricultural world and our general business end of things, I know SMSU, they've done a strong pilot with the Farm to Fork as a marketing plan for them to emphasize that it's not just growing corn or beans, or it's not just business, they're taking the whole food chain, and that's been their avenue for promoting, and I think that's fantastic. You know, as consumers have more of that demand, the consumers are customers. You know, I mean, that's why they're consumers, customers. It's the same word. You know, and so we have to make sure that we meet their need. And so from a workforce standpoint, as we look ahead into the future, I mean, from a recession view, people always eat, right? They always eat, and so it's how do we get that next generation of folks to come in? Not everybody has, like I said, 6 kids like myself, coming back from the farm. And so how do we get that next generation of people that maybe didn't grow up on a farm to come in and recognize that agriculture is important? And so for them to, like the agricultural education programs, I've been working with them closely across the state actually, looking at how they deliver their curriculum and their content. Because if I only delivered my content to farm kids, our programs would be tiny. But our ag programs across the state are growing and they're flourishing because people are starting to recognize the science behind our ag world that we have, the business components. I mean, if you're selling yellow number 2 corn and you think it's sweet corn, you got a problem, right? You know, I mean, there's a big difference, but some people don't know that. And so it's educating our consumers and to help them realize that there is a place for them within agriculture in various capacities. I mean, many of you maybe didn't grow up on a farm. And you're still here and you're interested in ag, and that's excellent. And so there's room for you at the table within our own college. You know, we're looking at our programs all the time. How can we meet consumer demand? Being a community and technical college, I mean, that's our job, is to provide workforce. That's what we do. So we no longer have a switchboard operator program. Doesn't make sense, right? But we have new emerging programs. I know SMSU, I believe you guys have a new program coming up too. Help me if I'm wrong here. Do you guys have a new degree, a fairly new one? Jerry, help me out. What's the name? Data Sciences. Data Sciences. Huge. You know, with automation and those types of things. And we're looking at, you know, different innovations within agriculture to help bridge the consumer cost, you know, because the consumer wants a reasonably priced product, but they demand a certain quality or type. So there, I'll take it that way from a workforce standpoint.
Okay. Thanks, Paul. All right, got a few more questions, and we will have time for anybody in the audience that has any questions as well. So next one, this is for Representative Swedzinski. What areas of value regarding agriculture can be added to Western Minnesota?
Wow. Well, we kind of touched on that a little bit, I'd say. Just adding value with it, you know, obviously using our current crops that we use and turning them into animals, turning them into meat, turning them into protein. That's a big one. You know, I think exploring those, and I think you know, combining with institutions such as the U of M, SMSU, all of our local groups, I agree. You know, the rest locally to develop markets and develop products. You know, foundationally, you know, Minnesota has been a great innovator when it comes to adding value. And you know, I think Wayne Gretzky said it best. He said, You know, what made me great was not to skate where the hockey puck is, but to where it's going to be. And, you know, from a rural economy standpoint, from an agricultural standpoint, what are those trends? And how do we set up our locally owned businesses? How do we set up businesses in Southwest Minnesota to understand where that's at? And, you know, folks talked a little bit, well, it's organic, it's this, it's that. While that is important, that is still a niche in many markets. It's something people strive for. You buy, you say, I want locally sourced, I want to know the farmer, I want to know this, I want to know that. That's always going to be part of the market. But, you know, to add value to, you know, what are commodities, is to say what are going to be the eating needs of the next generation? What are going to be the buying trends of that next customer? I was visiting with some folks with the Postal Service, and they said right now, the amount of packages that are running through just the local post office is higher than their Christmas rush 2 years ago. So if you view those types of things as trends, you know, Walmart's highly profitable, our downtown businesses are hurting, you know, it's that movement from interpersonal purchasing to online purchasing. Because it's a lot easier not to worry about it. I'm just going to order this, whether it's groceries, whether that's this, whether that's that, and moving online. So I think fundamentally, you know, our schools of education can play a big part of that. You know, our ag marketing and our other groups can say, you know, how do we integrate business, whether it's a downtown or a rural or a farm, so that you can have international markets, and so that we get as close to that purchase button as possible.
I might add on to what Chris said, just from the hog perspective, pork production. You know, sometime the future is the future. You know, data processing or data science or what that's the future, and sometime the future may even be the past. Mm-hmm. So when all the big packing plants closed down in earlier this spring, and that I made reference to, I had a lot of people say, you know, the John Morrell plant in Sioux Falls is way too big. Why don't you shut it down? Too many people, too close together. How do you replace 18 or 20,000 slaughtered animals a day that are processed? So you really can't. And my answer to them back then is, we're in the middle of the fire right now. Let's put out the fire, and then we might deal with it longer term. But I think in a real long-term sense, a medium to smaller processor like the prime pork plant in Windham, which is like, what, 8 or 9 or 10,000 head per day, that might be a nice alternative if you're really futuristic. Is it feasible? We all like cheap food, and the big plants are extremely efficient. Mm-hmm. When you talk about cutting out the middleman, I mean, the add-on from them as far as the ability to add to cut up, you know, get the pig on the shelf is phenomenally efficient. But then something that was demonstrated to us locally, if somebody wanted to butcher some animals for their own use or to sell, say, at the farmer's market, you can't find anyone around Marshall, Minnesota that will do it. You know, you have to probably get 30 to 50 to 60 miles away, and if you came to me and said, hey, I'd like to buy a pig to put in my freezer, let's call for an appointment. Okay, next February or March, you'll get it in.
Yeah.
So there's opportunities in the ultra-modern sciences, and there's also an opportunity in business for people who want to be creative and work hard and have a business plan. And that's one area that this real local area is missing.
Okay.
Open a butcher shop and sell freezers. You got her made, right, Greg?
Well, that's one of the things. You go to any store right now, you can't find canning jars, you can't find canning lids, you can't find deep freezes, and you can't find an appointment for a hog if you want to get it in until like January, February, March of next year. And so, you know, that's the realities of the situation. I think people are fundamentally thinking like our grandparents maybe did a little bit more, of saying, you know, maybe I shouldn't just go to the grocery store every day to pick up what I need. Maybe I need to put some back, and it's just a different mindset a little bit. But.
Okay, good. Ken, next one. So I was told China recently has had the largest grain purchase from the U.S. in history. Why are grain prices still near record lows? If demand is up, why are prices not going up?
I'll attack and then I'll hand it off. Maybe Eric's got a little bit wider perspective, but you know, it's the ebb and flow of supply and demand, in my opinion. You know, the cure for low prices is low prices. You know, we don't have $7 corn 10 years ago without 3 consecutive large global production years of corn. or low production years, excuse me, to get to $7. It has to kind of stack up in a series for major market swings that I've paid attention to really change dramatically. So we embrace the weather, we're cursed by the weather, all in the same crop growing season over time. Are the purchases going up because of politics and ironing out confusion and kissing at the playground and things like that? Yeah, I'm sure there's some of that going on. It sounds like China's in a food shortage right now. I guess I'll trust the news media to give me better information than the 5 contacts I have in the country of China and things like that. But I think we have to, like everybody's saying, embrace these opportunities and see what's going on. I think one of the things that surprised me the most in maybe the China market is with Asian swine flu. That kind of all got pushed on the back burner. And they slaughtered probably more hogs, Greg, you would probably know the numbers, than we did recently in the United States when the pandemic hit. And that was a swine disease, not a potential human vector disease and things like that too. So, that makes sense to me when I think about simple little dominoes that line up. They slaughtered a bunch of hogs. They're maybe not going to import corn or soybean meal or byproducts, but now maybe they're going to bring in live pork, slaughter it there. Maybe they'll bring in packaged pork and consume it there as well too. So to me, my experience in 26 years, the good comes with high production, and that usually means low prices, but it still may mean we're very, very profitable all the way around. I think we're in a challenging scenario that's kind of been discussed earlier is, what's got us by the last couple of years in southwest Minnesota, generally speaking, has been pretty good production years. And then maybe recently some government intervention to bridge that gap a little bit. If we get caught in the unfortunate circumstance of having a marginal or subpar crop in southwest Minnesota, but nationally it's all pretty good, we're stuck with marginal prices and marginal crops, and that's when we're really going to feel the pinch. And those are the tough years that we really struggle to get through. I mean, when I look at some trends within our business of Central Crop Consulting, something as simple as less traded corn, more conventional corn, and more growers talking to us about how do I get certified to be an organic producer. Those are local trends that local producers are tapping into a non-GMO corn market, a non-GMO soybean market, or maybe to the other side, stepping one step further into organic production as well too. So I think we're looking at a lot of creative opportunities with producers in southwest Minnesota, because hauling ADM, unfortunately, Eric, isn't always paying the bills. And that's not a surprise, I don't think, all the way around. So they're looking at creating opportunities themselves too.
So for us, the more we can sell to China, the better. The more we can transport, the better. But I think, to repeat that, the commodities in the markets, it's not going to change fast. It's going to need a whole lot of other things to happen. So
we've been beating up on Eric a little bit here with the prices. Okay. It's just fun to have a target. So now I know who's that guy. You make all the decisions for the global markets, right? Obviously.
They call me every day.
Every day. Well, the thing is, we've been talking about, the demand for China. We've also got a perfect storm too, with the oil companies having a little bit of a battle, between themselves. I can't remember the countries, but they're already battling a little bit and having the price wars on that. So that's driving that price down. Then we have consumers that are driving less, and so that drives down our ethanol production, or the ethanol demand. So all of a sudden you have a decrease in demand here, you've got a supply issue over here, and that just is going to create low prices. Jerry Tolan would teach you in econ. He'd give you all sorts of charts about this if you'd like from his econ class, which is a fantastic one, just saying. But the charts are amazing. But the reality is that our demand has been beat up so hard recently that China can buy a whole lot of corn, but it's going to take a lot to make up that ethanol that was lost. And then the pigs that aren't eating it, and we just had a storm that hit, and we're the epicenter of it right now.
Well, I think a year ago when we were having this conversation, obviously we were talking about bean prices as well then, and just the way the fundamental changes within China, they had they had no storage for soybeans on mainland China. So literally a ship would come full of soybeans, come to the port, and they would get processed right in the port. So they'd go right into a factory, get turned into meal, get turned into tofu, get turned into this, and then hit the market. And so there was no real buffer other than the ship to build up stocks or down. And so I think the Chinese has changed that quite dramatically in the last few years, or last year, to add a lot of storage for soybeans on mainland China. And so obviously, what does a bin do? We have a generous sponsor of the event today that builds bins, but what it does is give you a buffer, right? Essentially, you're putting money in the bank, wait for till you need it, or wait till the prices are high, and then you utilize that store from a consumption standpoint. And so storage is important, but also just we have a lot of grain, we have a lot of carryover. And so until we work through that or change the way we market, that's the, good years globally are bad for prices, right? And so as a farmer, sometimes you're reliant on bad things happening in other parts of the world. I mean, there's a reason why we know what the weather is like in Brazil. And do we pray for rain in Brazil? Or what do we pray for? Right? So we want the rain here in southwest Minnesota. We want good crops here, right where we live. So.
All right, last question, then I'm going to open up to the audience, and maybe Kaylee can come grab the mic here after this question, if there's are questions out in the audience. So there are, and you've touched on this, Representative Swedzinski, a few times, there are rumors of foreign interests purchasing farmland in Canada and in other states. What can be done to help that stop that here in Minnesota?
Yeah, well, you spoke a little bit too about, either corporations or foreign entities purchasing land. I talked to a legislator up in Canada talking that, they're not only purchasing the land, but then they're actually bringing in workers to farm it and then literally putting on a train for direct lines for the mainland. And so, that's not what we want. We do not want that. So I know Minnesota's got some corporate landowning laws on the books. I'm not sure how well they're enforced. But those are real concerns when you talk about integration, vertical integration, not just from a business standpoint, from a country standpoint. And you don't want it when you have a weak. I mean, a lot of the markets that we're dealing with are because we have a weak dollar, but a strong dollar compared to other parts of the world. And what does that mean for our grain marketing? What does that mean for our actual assets? And the last thing you want to be doing is selling hard assets in a time of a fire sale. You don't want to be selling land. You don't want to be selling things to pay your bills. You want to be able to pay your bills. And selling land to China is not going to be one of them. So.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, who's got a question in the audience? All right, one way in the back. Kaylee? While I'm waiting, I neglected to recognize a couple other people. We have two county commissioners in the room. We got Commissioner Gary Crowley, Commissioner Rick Anderson, and I want to recognize my friend Jen, who's going to be asking this question from the Minnesota Chamber.
Thanks, Brad. Can you hear me?
Just use the mic, it's fine.
Great discussion. Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I wanted to ask about technology. You touched on it a little bit, just from the perspective of your businesses and the ag industry overall. How important is technology? Where do you see it going? Is it important for the sector in Minnesota? And are there things that we can do from a private sector economy standpoint or from the state of Minnesota to help investments in technology to help the ag industry here?
Well, Paul talked a little bit about, from an economic standpoint, the families that are currently not with a second income, outside income to bring revenue, are the families that are probably most at risk, not only for depression, but economic desperation. And so, I think one of the things Minnesota's done a very excellent job with the leadership of Senator Dames and myself and leaders across the state is we've probably invested multiple millions of dollars more than any other area in the Midwest when it comes to broadband and access. So whether it's an online job, you've seen trends. We say, what is the world moving to? Is it moving to office space? They say downtown New York, some businesses have room for hundreds of thousands of office spaces, but only like 8% of them are currently being used. So are those people not working? Or are they working from home? So we need to give people opportunities to, if they have a job, anywhere in the state, anywhere in the country, that if they want to be able to move home and do the same work that they're doing in a high-paid, high-priced apartment in New York City, but they want to come back to Southwest Minnesota, which I'd recommend, that they can do that. And how do we do that? We do that by making sure that we have some of the best technology available. And the state of Minnesota has done a pretty darn good job of investing. We've gotten some federal grants as well, but we're definitely leading the Midwest when it comes to investment in broadband, and I think hopefully those are dividends that will pay.
From an educational standpoint, being an administrator at a college right now, or with any school, it's tough. How do we deliver the content? The world has switched a lot to the Zoom technologies or mobile, but it's shown disparaging differences. There's some of our employees that for health reasons, they should work from home, but they can't. Their internet doesn't work. They're out in the middle of Pipestone or something like that out in the country. We've got some students that can't access those things. And so we've made strides. There's still more to go. From a technology standpoint, I wanted to address that issue. The data that's transferred out of a tractor, Ken can probably attest to this, the amount of data that's transferred out of a tractor today is as much data as transmitted out of the space station during harvest. What we've got for technology capabilities within our tractors and our farm machinery is amazing. It's amazing what we have coming on, and it's only going to get more innovative. So a good friend of mine works for John Deere, and he's in the innovation area and with the GPS, and he's just like, Paul, he goes, I need more computer science folks. He's like, I need people that get ag that can program a tractor. Because so we have a fantastic diesel program in Canby. Those guys and gals can whip together a tractor like you've never imagined. What we're looking at for next steps, how do they troubleshoot the technology? Because when we have an issue on our tractor at home, we could usually figure it out. It's just that when the technology goes wrong, and because we didn't push the right buttons in the right sequence, or if you have a wire that frays, you want to talk about a really frustrated farmer, that's it. Because they know how to turn the wrenches and make it go, but when the technology doesn't work. And so we need young people that are interested in technology, because that's only going to continue to grow as we work on efficiencies. I mean, we used to think it was a big deal, when we looked at our fields and, well, we better spread some more fertilizer on it. And on the whole field, that's what we do. Well, now we can get site-specific. I mean, with Ken's program, we could go out and do tissue samples and know that this specific area needs more fertilizer than other ones, and it's going to get more precise. On the fly. A friend of mine, he's created a fertilizer spreader where he has a little zapper where it can test the tissue sample, or like test the nitrogen content, and then it puts the fertilizer down according to that same rate. That's pretty cool. And that's a homemade innovation thing. And he goes, it's delayed by about 30 feet. And I'm like, you're within 30 feet? He's like, I want to get it more close. I'm like, you're pretty darn good. But it's getting there. And we have some of those technological advances. I'm going to throw it over to Ken, because I'm sure you've probably seen a lot more of the technology that's being utilized within our fields.
Here's the catch-22. Technology is only useful if you utilize it.
Good point.
About 5 years ago, a particular planter manufacturer told us at a shared grower planter clinic we did that every planter leaves with precision ag capabilities. And somewhere less than 30% are being used at the farm gate level. Ouch. Ouch. That's underutilization of technology. But then we can go to the opposite spectrum. The 30% that are being used, there might be only 30% of those being used correctly. Ouch. What an injustice to technology. And this is where I think Chris has hit on it and Paul's hit on it. Education's going to have to drive some different thinking and some different skill sets within agriculture. It's going to be high tech, it's going to be computer science based, but it partially always has been, but that's accelerating at a fundamentally fast rate. The part that's missing is the fundamental animal and crop science education. The computer doesn't know if Greg's pigs are sick. Computer maybe can tell me that corn looks a little yellow, but it may not be able to tell me why is it yellow. Well, it just rained 16 inches in 4 days. It's going to look a little yellow. And then it's going to get brown and die. I don't need a computer to tell me that. But as we get better with what they kind of term within technology, artificial intelligence and machine learning, repetitive habits can get measured very easily with technology and computers. And that learned habit can drive different outcomes and decisions as well, too. So where we're at today is drastically going to change, But we need that technology sector, that education sector to understand that science base via the computer. And then we need another avenue that can ground truth, that understand production agriculture still, to make sure we can connect it all together. Because if not, we're taking 10, 20, 30 years steps backwards. And we're going to have to quit those failing fast moments all the way around. So it's here to stay, but it's harnessing it together through the data analysis, after the data collection that Paul mentioned, of how many seconds a tractor's generating data for somebody to read, but nobody's reading it. You know, how many data pings does a yield monitor combining your corn at 5 miles an hour ping across the quarter section? More than most of us are looking at. So how do we keep refining it down better and better? I mean, how many times have I heard through our consultant team, wow, I've got a $500,000 tractor and planter pulling through this field. It's got all the fancy bells and whistles technology that I think I could spend money on, and I still got a crappy stand of corn. Oops. Was it a little too wet? Was your planting depth a little too shallow? Did you have that hard rain that caused a crust? Do you have some insects? Do you have some disease? But $500,000 of technology didn't save that situation from happening. So that's the one challenge we have in production agriculture, not the marketing side, but production agriculture is to constantly relearn and adapt on the go. This is the most challenging business, I believe, production agriculture, because it's kind of under not a hoop building, but a blue sky Quonset for the fundamental crops we grow. Animal agriculture and some crops can move into greenhouses and production facilities and things like that, which make that environment more controllable, but Greg still needs X number of bushels of corn every day to feed to the hogs. There's not a greenhouse big enough in Lyon County to supply Greg his corn under glass and plastic. So we're kind of, I think, at a crossroads. And, you know, I'm just old enough to be called old school in today's agriculture. And what I see missing the most is fundamental soil science, crop science, animal science principles and fundamentals. Everybody's excited about technology, but we don't connect the two together well enough. And that's where we've got to get there faster for technology really to help save us and advance us both at the same time.
I got a simple example. So I grew up on a hog farm, and what hogs, they make the product, but they also create a waste. So when I was a kid, we would go out and just spread the fields, right? You just keep putting manure out in the fields, and we did that when I moved onto our cattle farm. And then we started working with Central, and Tim, who's here, our crop consultant, and worked really closely with him. We started looking at our fields, and we said, shoot, we don't need to be hauling manure in this spot. And so I put a GPS on my tractor so I can haul manure. I can, being in education and being an administrator, people give me grief that I can precisely apply the right amount of crap in most situations. And so that's kind of what I'm doing right now in my fields. There's some areas where they just need just a little sprinkling, just a little bit, and I go really fast. And then there's some areas that I need to lay it on really thick, okay? And so it's using the tools that we have. It's the old school technology of manure, right? But how do we use it better? Understanding, like Kenan said, how do you understand that better? So yeah, I've got the pretty maps all over the place, and we can precisely apply it. I'm sorry, that was a crappy example.
I think Paul should get into politics if you're gonna.
Yeah.
I think it's a good.
Sorry, dad pun of the crappy example.
I think it's a good example that goes back to one of the first questions about regulations. On an average rate per acre, Paul's doing everything right. And for the pollution control or Minnesota Department of Ag, Paul has to hit an average value per acre to apply his manure. But he's not putting it on uniformly. He's putting more here, less there as needed agronomically, and he didn't say the big E word. He's being environmentally responsible too. But this is a challenge with some of the regulations that we deal with at township, county, state, federal levels. They have a difficult time understanding variable rate technology, precision agriculture, what technology can do to apply things better, more correctly, more accurately, and still hit the average number they want. Huge, huge challenge for us in production agriculture right now is coming to a common table, having the right people there with common sense and the right educational and science background to advance us forward. We're kind of stuck doing this. Well, on average, I can do it. But I'm going to do it better than average. Because average teams don't win championships. You got to be slightly above average. We're just damn lucky. Sometimes luck beats skill every day of the week.
Or the Patriots.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw a curveball right now because he's right in my line sight, and I've looked at Relco True Shrimp and technology.
Yeah.
Brian, are you interested in answering this kind of question at all? I mean, I know I'm putting you on the spot, but with Relco and True Shrimp, I would think that you're always trying to have the best of the technologies possible.
Well, thanks, Brad. I was prepared for this.
You owe him lunch.
Yeah, I mean, certainly it's another good example, I think, of what happens here in the Midwest when you bring technology to our Midwestern work ethic. You know, and certainly as we look at the True Shrimp project over a 5-year time span, I mean, it's brought technology to bear, you know, at a level that I've not seen, quite honestly. It does, when Paul was describing the tractor and all the data that comes out of a tractor, the data that comes out of our tanks every single hour is just overwhelming. And so our ability to process that data and implement it into something that matters, you know, that's where the real secret is. But, you know, to think that we could take a saltwater creature, last time I checked, I don't know if you guys have found saltwater anywhere around here, but it's nowhere near Minnesota and the upper Midwest.
Right.
But we've effectively been able to raise a saltwater creature in an environment that is controllable, sustainable, and probably most importantly for all of us here in the Midwestern agricultural world, scalable. You know, we can grow a product that's big enough and has enough quantity to make a difference in retail and food. So technology, you know, that whole discussion to me, just the word is, it's so overwhelming, it's almost, you know, it's almost anticlimactic because there's so much. I mean, I appreciate Ken's comments to the nth degree here because there's so much data and information we have are real. I mean, to be honest with you, I think a school like SMSU and our other Midwestern, upper Midwestern campuses have opportunities like no other universities in the world because you've got access to all these new technologies, but the ground level thinking and approach, the old school stuff, which I still appreciate too, by the way, Ken, you know, melding that together in a university system is a pretty fantastic opportunity. So, you know, we like to talk fork to field or field to fork and vice versa, but where that really comes together is in education and the ability to scale these ideas up.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it. One more question from the audience before we close it.
I'm interested in hearing you address the alternative meat and how that long-term will impact our meat industry, whether it be plant-based alternative meat or where they could just, I think they can take a little piece of hamburger and grow a whole pound out of it nowadays. And so what impact will that have on our meat industry?
Okay, Greg.
As a production, as a farm that's a production animal, livestock producer, we watch that, monitored continually. The conferences I've gone to, obviously it was a big fear. I think the general consensus of the pork industry is it's going to be a competitive alternative protein to. So when you go to your food shelf, you're going to see pork, you're going to see beef, you're going to see poultry, fish, and then you'll see the plant-based alternative product or the culturally based product, which is a different product. So our fear isn't that it's going to take over the livestock industry. I think our thoughts, or at least my thought, is more it'll be a competitor. It'll be looking for food for grocery store shelf space. What I felt good about in the spring, when they had the rush on the grocery stores and you went there and you couldn't find paper towels, toilet paper, or anything else, and you went to the food shelves, in the meat case, The grocery store I was in on that particular day, because I took a picture of it, the whole meats case was cleaned out. You couldn't find a package of meat, but the Impossible burger meat, the plant-based meat, that was still there on the shelf. So that, I felt good about that. So. I think unrelated to that, some states mandate it's not a direct, but I could be in politics. You'll ask me one question, I'm going to answer another one. I think some states' production demands on producing meat may be more restrictive and constrictive to our industry than the plant-based meats themselves, and the state in particular would be California. If California's, they have this called Proposition 12, Prop 12. If Prop 12, when that's implemented, essentially pork, eggs will not be able to be produced under their guidelines, and meat produced in Minnesota, Iowa, or anywhere else will not be able to be brought into or sold in that state. As a result of those, they can demand that anything sold within their state will have to be produced under those same guidelines. And California is like a huge economy globally. I think the number is like 7 or 9. They'd be like the 7th or 9th largest global economy. That's a bigger concern than plant-based meat.
So we make the Impossible, well, I don't remember the brands, but we make the alternative proteins and meats. We've got lots of investments going there. We see that as a growth opportunity. As long as there's demand, we'll keep making it and hitting it. We also sell to the pork and the cattle and poultry and everybody else. So we're going to try that, but we're just going to hit the demand. But we make the pea proteins, pure proteins. We make lots of different things, but we do make the alternative meat products.
Well, I think that's a good point. At the end of the day, we're all in agriculture. If agriculture isn't willing to stand together, no one else is going to stand with us. So our goal needs to be, if we're going to be growing pigs, let's do it here in Southwest Minnesota. If we're growing cattle, let's do it in Southwest Minnesota. If we're producing soybeans to turn into Impossible burgers, let's do it here in Southwest Minnesota. And, I think, from an economic standpoint, that's, some common sense. Obviously, there's competition in that. There's competition for raw goods when you have those conversations. But, you go to any large city and you go to restaurant row, right? There's 4 or 5 restaurants in a row, or there's an area in the city that is all restaurants. And why do they do that? Is because restaurants begat restaurants, and agriculture begats agriculture. The more agriculture you have, the more value added you have, the better off you're all potentially going to be. And when it comes to California regulation, those are real concerns we have in this state. Governor Walz, God bless the guy, but he is looking to bring California auto emission gas standards right here to the state of Minnesota. He wants to do it by edict. And whether that's environmental reasons or whatnot, that should be a decision of the legislature, and they should vote no on it. But first and foremost, the last thing, we should be importing California raisins, not gas emissions standards.
Sorry, I'm a beef farmer, and so when I heard you say that you produce, or that you sell things to the Impossible, I just kept thinking the Impossible burger must taste like gluten and like corn or cattle feed, maybe. I'm kidding. Yeah, I hope it's not a substitute. Again, sorry teasing you. Oh man,
they're getting along so well.
All right, it's time to wrap this up. Thank you, panelists, for taking the time today. It's good education for everybody, especially for agriculture novice like myself. A lot of good people out here in the audience. I hope they can stick around a little bit, and if you have any other questions, I'm not too sure of the panelists' time, but I sure appreciate you all coming. Congratulations again to Bob and Paula G. For beginning the Lyon County Farm Family of the Year. Have a great rest of the day. And